Hello, how you doing? Um, is the sound and video okay? Okie doke. What I'd like to start talking about today is what happens when a watch is sort of taken from become from an independent to a owned by somebody else. Hang on a second. Let me see if I can find what I'm looking for here. There we go. Hi Mark. Hi Dominic. How you guys doing? Good. There we go. Uh, this morning, what I was doing, I was looking at Richemont, the companies that it owns, and most of them I was familiar with, but a lot of them I was very surprised to see that they were owned by Richemont. I sort of knew that, but I didn't know that. You forget about it. Just about everything that's not owned by Swatch. Hey, Mike's watches and Big Sal and William and Adam. Hi, Adam. Tibor, Jonathan, Graham. Hi, Graham. Okay. Well, let me start off. Hi, Canadian Watch Monkey. I got to start off with this Van Cleef and Arpels RDC at Ur Dayer. Let's see if you can see it. It's hard to get up there. Now, this watch. Um, yeah, gobble. That's true. They do. This particular watch is by this one is by Van Cleef and Arpels. Now this in 20, let me see, when was it? 1999, Richemont bought 60% of Van Cleef and Arpels. Okay, it's a majority interest in the company, but still, for the most part, Van Cleef and Arpels, at least as far as watches were concerned, they kept working with the people that they had worked with, and especially in women's watches, they had these really interesting complications, but also some in men's watches too. And as time went on, they just started racking up all these wins. And if you look at the number of awards, of Grand Prix awards that are won by Van Cleef and Arpels, it's surprisingly high because you don't think of a luxury company, and that's how sort of Van Cleef and Arpels is viewed. But anyway, so they had in 1999 they bought 60%, and then they bought another 20% in 2001. So 80% of it is owned by uh, Richemont Group. So then in let's see, this last year, they entered the Grand Prix with this really gorgeous looking watch, and it had all these little flowers on it and stuff. This is in the women's complications, I think. They didn't win, but they won in another sort of like these guys are doing good award. But the thing of it was that the special movement, rather than being done by Agenor as it had in the past, was done by Val Fleurier. And Val Fleurier is the movement company that was created by Richemont so that they could make movements for all of these companies that they owned. I believe they started off with a movement that was used in Cartier. They used it in Piaget. They even used it in the 56, the entry version 56 of Vacheron Constantin, which Vacheron Constantin worked over itself. But there was something about that was different. I mean, it wasn't like if you, in 2016, Vacheron Constantin came out with this wonderful new movement, the 5100. And I think it was about 2013 they came out with a great hand wound movement, the 4400, both of which they're still using today. But my question is that on the one hand, the 56, the entry level 56 with the movement base from Valfleury, um, is not quite the same. Now, this isn't to say that using a non in-house movement is a bad thing because it's not. It's sometimes you can actually have movements that are much better. For example, Voiture, or ones from, oh God, what's it called? The German company UMD or UWD, Uhren Works Dresden. Now that's part of Langenheim, and this movement called the, I think it's 33.1, UWD 33.1, was designed by Marco Lang. And so here you can have, if there was this one company that made these hideously ugly watches in Germany that is now out of business, but they put one of those movements in it. I wish I'd bought one of their ugly watches and just to get the movement, but anyway, but they were bought by, I don't know, somebody who is primarily into business. So I guess if we look at some of the other ones, if you look at Swatch, for example, and they own Breguet, you have all of these wonderful things in Breguets, and now they started stuffing the silicon hairsprings in them, and it's not quite the same. I mean, Abraham Louis Breguet wouldn't use anything like that. So anyhow, I thought, well, let's see what they do with these things. A friend of mine, who was a watchmaker and a former judge on Grand Prix, was a huge fan of Longa, and he said that after a while they were bought by Richemont as well. They weren't quite the same. They started losing their edge, their creativity, and looking for movements that were more along a certain set of guidelines that were laid down by Richemont. Trying to think now. Okay, on the other hand, a lot of these companies would have gone under had it not been for Richemont literally pulling them out of the fire. So you have these two things. There's sort of a two-edged sword. On the one hand, you have the financial backing that keeps the company afloat, and one of the reasons you have financial backing, Respawn expects to make money, and they're more interested in the financial gains than any kind of great innovation in horology. The fact that they've held off on silicon springs is sort of an interesting thing. Okay, so that's what I wanted to talk about today. I want to hear about your watches. What watches do you have? Have you seen any changes in watches that were once owned by sort of independents and then became part of a stable? Let's see who we got here. Hi, Kinasaki. How you doing? Um, Thomas. Uh, Neiman Marcus. Hi, Adam. Hi, Paul. Javi. Good morning, Javi. Rancher. Tim. Hi, Jim. Tim. Make sure you upvote my logarithm. Thank you. Gustav, how are you? Brian, good to see you. For brands like Balmain Mercier, Richemont was a blessing. I agree, Thomas. That's a good point. Um, Balmain Mercier has some. Yes, I sometimes it is. I mean, sometimes they upgrade them, and I think that they got their Balmatic is by Vauxhall. Before that, they were using ETAs. Um, Swatch and Richemont both ran into burning orphanage to rescue imperiled waifs and took them straight to their own bordellos. That's yeah. Others, they, oh, that's funny. And they put them in storage containers to keep them. Uh, love Richemont. Wish they owned Brigade. Yeah, I wish they did too, Tim. Yeah, who they own? Let me see. Um, hold on one second. I'll bring that up. Um, where are they? Richemont. Here we go. Okay, just so we can sort of gather everybody up. Um, Here are the maçons that are owned by Richemont. Now, this is who they call the watch specialist. Alanga, Baume Mercier, IWC, Jaeger-LeCoultre, Panerai, Piaget, Roger Dubuis, Vacheron Constantin. I wish they would take Roger Dubuis and use some of the earlier designs. This everything they have now is skeletonized by Roger Dubuis. And the thing is, what they did, this is talk about, I don't know, somehow no brainers. They have all of these movements that were originally done by Roger Dubuis, and then they gave him some stupid name and like some just they changed it. There's no reason to do that. They could have had to say this was a Roger Dubuis movement, but instead they have these things like, oh, now it's a modern or some stupid thing like that. Okay, so those I'm not prejudiced. Those are the main watch specialists, but they also own Cartier, which makes watches, Van Cleef and Arpels, that makes a few watches, mostly women watches, but they make a few really nice men's watches. Uh, Now, then they have what are called other ones that are called fashion and accessories slash other. Included in that are Dunhill. They make a few watches. I I have one. Mont Blanc that they make they're very well known for watchmaking, but one of the things that surprised me is that they own something called Watchfinder and Company. So not only do they own the watch company, I think they own the companies that sell the watches. One of these days, you're going to find out they'll have Chrono 24 now is owned by Richemont or Swatch or eBay or one of those. That's our what do they call Watchbox? So buy Watchbox. Who knows? Um, do you consider FPJ still an independent? Oh yeah, definitely. I know their own 20% was bought by Chanel, but I now this again, who you going to believe? I don't believe anybody in the watch business, but this is what FP Journe said. I mean, the guy can't keep stock. I mean, no matter how many FP joins they make, they seem to be a waiting list to get them. So I don't think they're having a problem. That their prices have gone up, so they don't have a problem with that. What FP Journe said when Chanel, why he sold 20% to Chanel, was that he didn't have any legacy. I mean, he said that none of his kids were interested in becoming watchmakers, and that's generally the case. There are very few kids. I mean, back in the old days, the whole family would be watchmakers. But that's not true anymore. You do have some cases of that, but not like it used to be. And so he wanted someone. He figured, and then he told everybody he's just about to die, so you better buy one of his watches. Which there was nothing wrong with him other than I think he put some gray makeup on to do that ad. So anyway, um, okay. I'm surprised Richemont wrecked Panerai. Never a fan of Pam's. Watch size too big. Uh, I always liked the looks of Panerai, but I never knew. I mean, it was sort of like Forrest Gump's box of chocolates. You never knew what you're going to get inside a Panerai. You're going to get a 318, or they're going to do something pretty nice. Who knows? Um, Hi, Lambotan. Panerai is doing great. You love to buy a Pam. Okay. I always like the looks of Panerai. Just something about them I wasn't too sure about. Hi, Gustav. Happy Swatch. Make it possible for me to have my beloved Glashütte original service. Surely that is worth something. I agree. It is worth something. Um, I, I'm glad to hear that it was because of that. Um, it's nice to hear. Chrono 24 double dips the host sells for others and also sell directly. That's true. They're doing quite well. Um, I only like 38 millimeter to 42 millimeter watches, so PAMs are out. Okay. Yeah, that's pretty much my sweet spot too. Is right in that same area. I've got about a 7 1/4 inch wrist, and I don't like something that looks like a frisbee on my wrist. I don't like something that looks really small. But different ones are different. This one is 42 millimeter, and it feels like it feels like nothing's there. It's really small. Yeah, Big Sal. Well, yeah, I'm for sale for millions and millions. They'll buy watch our side. Uh, okay, get your Porsche 914. I want a Morgan plus four. Uh, I recently saw the service cost of a Vossure micro rotor was under 300. Wow, that is good. That's very good. Um, Good morning, Idle Time. How you doing? Do you like Langenheim Friedrich the Third? Yeah, I do. I have the Friedrich the Second by Langenheim, and it's exactly like the third, except the Friedrich the Third, has different. It has Roman numerals, and it has fancier hands. Um, Mine has the Arabic numbers, and I'm trying to think what kind of hands it has. I ought to pay attention to the hands on that, but they're a little different. Both watches have that same great caliber 6 movement. So, yeah, small is the new big. Maybe. Hi, Gustav. I do love all independent watchmakers today, so I'm a bit scared of buying them. We'll have to have service in 20 years. Yeah, that's something I don't worry about. I guess I should. I was talking to the guy in New York at the FP Jorn boutique the other day, and he, what I like to do for service, I like to take it down to New York, give it to them, and then they send it down to the service center in Miami. Somehow in my mind, I have a feeling that if they get it from the New York boutique, they're not going to mess with it. I have no reason for believing that. I had two of my FP Jorns serviced in Miami, and that was what I did. I did a great job. But one of them now is due for service again. Um, and the one that I like to wear the most, and that's my Chronomet Souvain. The service price costs, they do great service. And so does Parmigiani, also in Miami for service. If you have a Parmigiani, they do spectacularly good service. Not quite as expensive as FP Journe, but pretty good. Michael, that is a perfectly succinct way of putting it. The decisions by the corporate might conflict with the needs of the brands. I agree. Uh, Not that they think of the consumers at all. They figure, well, if we paint a pretty picture on them, they'll buy it. And to some extent, they're right. I mean, there's a lot of stuff that they do nobody does anything to, and they keep selling them like mad. Any opinions on El Laroy, like the Osmeor? Oh boy, Lambo. Let me tell you, Lambo, I had one of those and I loved and hated it. It's one of the most just a beautiful watch. The history of El Leroy is fantastic. But what made me just crazy nuts mad at them was that they said they gave some kind of phony baloney caliber name to the caliber, turned out to be 7001, an ETA 7001, Pazoo 7001 in it. And what made me so mad about it was that they lied to me. They implied that it had a Piaget movement or something like that. But I finally traded it for a Kristen Vanderklaw. But I'll tell you, that is such a gorgeous watch. I really like those, and what I would like to see is Eldorado put in one of their movements, and I think, just to develop a simple movement, wouldn't kill them. And then they have the Besom comb. They used to make them in Besom comb, and there they have the observatory, and then they could get the COS, the chronometer verification by the observatory in Besançon, and then they have the serpent's head on the movement. The one that they have now doesn't have that serpent's head. I would really like to see something good happen with them. They're owned by Festina, and Festina, it's from my view of it, just hasn't done anything with them. They've had them for a number of years now, and they just sort of didn't do anything. Of course, before Festina bought them, they were just doing stupid stuff anyway, letting the brand just go to nothing. So I mean, I think that there are some models that, and their best models, seem to have a Vaucher movements in them. But boy, I tell you, that Osmiar, that plain simple one of the most beautiful watches I ever owned. And I was mad at it the whole time, even though it looked great. Um, oh, okay. Idle time. That's an interesting analogy. What happens to prepaid phone companies when they get bought by the big phone companies like Verizon or T-Mobile? Hey, Federico. Hi. I finally decided to make my watch the old way by modifying a 6498 bridges. I also made the hands and an enamel dial. Wow, Federico, that's fantastic. That is very cool. I think everybody ought to make a watch. You don't have to make one that fancy, but if you make a watch, get on AliExpress or one of those, get the case and the hands and the dial and the movements. Costs you under $100 to get that stuff and put the watch together. There are lots of videos on how to do it. There's this one English guy who's great about it. But doing that will really help you understand a lot more than you know if you don't do it. And it doesn't cost that much. In fact, that's one way to look at it. If you got the itch to buy a watch, you don't have the scratch for it. Make one. Oh, good question, Thomas, about the yeah. Festina owns what brand? Festina owns a Leroy, or just Leroy now, I think. James Reeson tried to trade me a gold one year for something else. Um, yeah, they're very conflicted about them. That was one of the first watches I got, and when I was looking at really high level watches, and I was looking for interesting ones with a rich history. That thing, the El Leroy's got a fantastic history too. Ickler makes some incredible DIY watch cases for ETA calibers. Oh yes, Thomas. Yes, Ickler has some very nice cases. In some respects, they're too nice. Okay, get a cheap one from from the same guy that you buy the dial, the hands, and the movement from, and then everything goes together. But Ickler, yeah, they have. If you want a nice one, you're right about that. Allanga owned by Richemont and FP Journe semi-independent, which is better or inferior and why? Well, I mean, Michael, the difference I think A Longa, as as the rancher put it, they got pulled out of the fire by Richemont and put into a whorehouse, basically. That's one difference. Whereas FP Jorn wanted to keep the name and everything going, and he figured, well, Chanel, which is just like rich, 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 is the one that's going to sort of keep it. And so I don't think I think there's a big difference between the two because I don't think that FP Journe was hurting for money. He wanted oh what immortality. There's a difference. Yeah, Gustav, that's exactly what I was talking about. You make a few of yours, you really appreciate the guys doing it for you. Zenith 135-0 observatory chronometer made in collaboration with Wooten, Lonan, and Phillips. That one is a very special one. It's a very expensive one, if I'm not mistaken. One thing about Zenith I do not like, they tend to try to increase accuracy by having higher and higher frequencies. Okay, they're like 5 hertz and so forth. And what I don't like about it is one, it really bangs up the movement parts a lot. But if you're worried about that thing, get a quartz. A, a 5 hertz frequency is about 36,000 VPH. A a quartz runs at 32,000 hertz compared to 5 hertz that they're thinking, well, we're going to up the frequency. I'd much rather have an 1800 frequency that was put together, 18,000 frequency that was put together by um, Root and Lonan because that's what he uses. The other ones are using most of the top notch ones all use below 4 hertz. Um, even though some good brands do use 4 hertz. Certainly Rolex and Parmigiani, they like 4 hertz. So does Gauthier. He likes 4 hertz too. But most of them are 3 hertz or 2.5 hertz. By a spring drive. Well, that's just sort of another way of charging a quartz. I mean, if you want, you know, look, if you want the right time, this is what I use. my my iPhone. My wife has an Apple Watch. Yeah, it tells you who's everything. Tells you who's going to win the World's Cup. It's got more information than you can I could deal with. I don't want that. I want one of these things that is cranky and you have to adjust and do different things to make it work right. Yeah, yeah. Putting the hands on, boy, the hands on. I got one of the things I tell you if you're I got one of these things. This is a hand setter, and you put the dial down here, and then you get that so it's just right on the hands, and then you push it down and push the hands in. This has really been very helpful. I also have one of those special sticks, and they have on one end they have the size for the minute hand, and then on the other for the hour hand. The hour hand has a larger hole for it, and so you put it on, and then you have the with a stick, it just sort of goes around and pushes it down, and then when you put the minute hand on top of that, it has a little smaller one. That's another thing you can use too. Uh-oh, frying pan time. Okay. Uh, what do you have that's expensive and tasteless? I don't have anything that's tasteless. Got a lot of expensive ones, but nothing tasteless. Okay, guys, I gotta run. Michael, does any Richemont brands have the ability to retain the same franchise as an independent, or is Richemont always a stigma? No, no, no. Richemont is not a stigma. They just sort of they keep their name out of it. But then if you go to their site, they'll tell you who they own. And some of the what's her name? Carol Forster Kasapi. She was a watchmaker of the year, and that's when she was working at Cartier, and that's owned by Richemont. So, and there's some other brands, some independent brands that are, even though they're independent, not AHCI brands, but other ones. Just because they're independent, that doesn't mean they're very good. So, listen, guys, I got the it's frying pan time. This afternoon, what I'd like to talk about are something happened. I read recently that Daniel Roth watches from the 90s are being revived by Louis Vuitton's Le Temps, something, I forgot the name of it. Something La Temps. That's sort of a watchmaker they own. By the way, LVMH is huge. When Elon Musk blew what I don't know how many billions of dollars buying Twitter, he was no longer the richest man in the world. The guy who was the main guy at LVMH. So Louis Vuitton is like these guys doing something right or something rich anyway. Okay, well, I wanted to start with that this afternoon and look at sort of bringing back some greats of the past that weren't recognized until more recently. And that I think would be fun to talk about. Rolex did it in 2004, I think, with the Prince, and so let's talk about that. That might be fun. See what they could do. Everyone be safe, take care. It's really cold here today, and so I'm not going out and slip on ice. I suggest you don't do the same. Take care.